liberdade. Negro é a raiz da liberdade. Um sorriso negro, um abraço negro, traz felicidade. Nego sem emprego, fica sem sossego. Negra é a raiz da liberdade. Welcome to the Tropical Girl Show. I was just singing Sorriso Negro by Brazilian legend Dona Ivone Lara. I am Pauline Batista, your favorite tropical girl. Welcome to Where is Always Sunny. I am so happy to be here. I was just talking to one of our studio friends, Janitza. How are you, Janitza?
I'm good. How are you?
You know, I'm good in yellow with a bunch of butterflies on my suit. You know, I'm the tropical girl, so that's what I do. I'm totally joking. So on my way here, you know, I was listening to this Brazilian playlist. So fun fact for you just joining now, I am from Brazil. I'm from Rio de Janeiro. That's where, you know, samba was created. Samba was birthed. And sometimes I listen to those playlists because, you know, I feel homesick. I feel like we do have a strong Brazilian community, right? But where I live, which you get to guess in the comment section below, so maybe you get a prize if you guess where I actually live. I was telling one of our producers that we'll do that, a little poll to guess where I live. There are a lot of Brazilian folks, so whenever I have a Brazilian guest or when I get to talk to Brazilian people in general, right? It just really warms my heart. I think that's an interesting part of, being a Latina in the U.S., understanding that oftentimes you will not find community because, you just don't have your own, in my case, Brazilians around, right? But I find a lot of community in the Dominican community and also in the Puerto Rican community. My best friends are Dominican, as you're gonna see along the show. So please, do watch our episodes. I am so very happy to be here. Honestly, just bear with me though. I will tell you a secret. The tropical girl is perfect, but not relatable. So I put my contact lens on the flip side today. So it's gonna be so crazy. So Janitza, help me God, help me God. So help me God. Okay, so usually, as you know, I like to open our show with a quote and a thought right before announcing who our guest is. But just so you know, I already, dropped a spoiler and I said that our guest is from Brazil today. So actually today we have a major force in Brazilian journalism. I will not tell you her name until I actually announce her. So we'll be talking about, what does it mean to be a Latina and what does that mean when it comes to media and communication. And I'm very happy to have our guest here. However, before we have our quote, right? I think our quote is the spice that I need to get our conversation started, right? So the quote used to be, about Latinidad, right? Whatever that means, so Latinidad. So initially, it said that it's, a particular geopolitical experience that contains the complexities of immigration, colonialism, legal status, class, nation, language, and politics of location. However, let's pause for a second. What are your thoughts about Latinidad? I want to hear from you in the comment section down below. Yeah, just write it up because we all know that this is bogus. You know what I'm saying? We all know that this concept, Latinidad is something that we kind of cling on, right, in order to make community. But most importantly, it was a concept invented by the U.S., in the U.S. alone. When you're in Brazil, you are from Brazil and you're Brazilian. And that's kind of it. And I'm sure that when you were in the Dominican Republic, you were Dominican. And that's kind of it. So the Tropical Girl Show is actually about that, right? I want folks to hear directly from the source whenever we talk about things like Latinidad, right? I am a Latina, and I have my guest today, and we'll be talking about, what that means and what that doesn't mean. So that being said, we'll go back to the quote and read it as we really like to believe, right? I mean, Latinidad is really, I don't want to spoil it to you, but what Latinidad really is a fabricated geopolitical, Janita, what does it say? Identity that contains the complexities of immigration, colonialism, blah, 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 legal status. It's all bogus, and it usually erases blackness, right? And it usually erases indigeneity. And those are conversations that we're having across our first season here at the Tropical Girls Show. So now that you saw Latinidad, right? And I think that if you're watching today and if you're not an academic, right, which is most of our audience today, you may not even think about that, right? You are proud of being a Latino. I am proud of being a Latina, but what does that mean? Let's chat, right? So today, as I was saying before, we have a major voice in mass media communication, someone who I deeply admire and look after. Like I said, she's a major journalist for the Brazilian community and also the global community, right? And she is also a professor. So today we have journalist Mila Burns. Mila, are you there?
I'm here. Hi, Pauline. How are you?
Good. How are you? Oh my gosh, it's so good to have you. I'm a huge fan of your work. So I'm being a total groupie today. So forgive me, people. So Mila Burns, everybody. Yay. Welcome to the Tropical Girls Show where it's always sunny. So how is it today, Mila? Where are you speaking from today?
I'm in New York, where I'm actually based. I live in New York. I've been here for the past 12 years. First of all, it's an honor being here with you too. I follow your work closely, and I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to be here talking to you and everyone who is watching us here. So thank you so much. Yeah, I'm in New York. It's hot here too.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Mila, this is so amazing to have you here. Anyway, so my first, I have a zillion questions to you, but we have to narrow it down to only a few today. So my first question to you, as someone who is a fan and someone who looks up to you. So you said that you've been here for 12 years, right? So I mean, how did you get here? You know what I'm saying? Where are you from in Brazil, and how did you get here? What was your career path? So yeah, how did that happen? Because that's a question that I asked to everyone at Tropical Girls Show.
It's a very complex question when it's related to me, because I didn't have a very linear path.
Yeah.
So I was born in Vitória, Espírito Santo, which is a relatively small city in comparison to Rio and São Paulo,
right.
And people here tend not to know where it really is. It's really like between Rio and Bahia. And I've been there until I turned 17. Then I moved to Rio and started working from a very early age to support myself in a different city without my family, which is something not necessarily very common in Brazil. Here in the US, everyone sort of does that if they go to college. But in Brazil, that's not necessarily how it works. So I moved to Rio. I spent my career there. I began my career there. I worked in multiple places, magazines, newspapers. As a journalist, I did my BA at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And then I started a trainee program at Globo, which is the biggest Brazilian TV. And since then, I've been working there in different places and different newscasts. But now I'm here, as you said, for 12 years. I moved here for work. Globo invited me to come here to do a show that at the time was called Planeta Brasil, in which we basically looked for Brazilians living in the US and in the Americas in general. I spent a year doing that show. Then the show turned into a road show. So I spent another year in the same show, but in a kind of road show. We crossed the US, Mexico, and Canada looking for Brazilians and their stories. It's really an amazing experience. And then I moved back to New York, and now I host a weekly newscast called American News, in which I have the pleasure of interviewing some of the brightest minds in the US. So it's an honor. As you said, I'm also a professor here. I did my BA in journalism back in Brazil, then a master's in anthropology, also in Brazil at the Federal University of Rio. When I moved here, I did a second master's at Columbia University and my PhD at CUNY, the Graduate Center. And now I teach at Lehman College at CUNY, and it's a place like it's always been my dream job. So it's an amazing place to be in.
Amazing. See, I have a good friend who actually teaches there too, so we have to chat after this because I'm sure you know her. She works with Latinos and the Puerto Rican community. But thank you so much for sharing. So, you know, as a fellow Brazilian, Mila, something that I found, you know, I think that, you know, since we're talking about Latinidad, right, and what being a Latino means and it doesn't, right? So that's a question that I love to ask my guests. So did it come as a surprise to you, you know, the minute you came here and that you were a Latina, right? And Latina was kind of, at least to me, so I can't assume that was your experience, but to me, my primary identity, right? The first thing that folks said to me was that I was a Latina. Did you have a moment in which that happened to you as well? What was your experience when you first got here when it comes to identity?
Yeah, that's a great question. As you were saying before, it's an invented concept. It's something that doesn't exist for us back home mostly, right?
Yeah.
We don't identify as Latinos. We identify as Brazilians, Argentinians, Chileans, Mexicans, and so on and so forth. And then when we get here, we all of a sudden get this label. And at first, it was really weird for me to see that I had a label imposed on me by someone else, by basically an imperial power, but I grew very fond of it because I am immediately identified as Latina, as you said. People talk to me, approach me in Spanish, and there was a time when I felt that also that was a little tricky, that I felt like, this is not even my mother language. I'm from Brazil, we speak Portuguese. Why are you talking to me in Spanish? But all of a sudden, I really, not all of a sudden, it was a process, but I started feeling like this was really part of who I was, be it because of their labels or not, but I really felt a deep connection with people from Latin America in general who lived in this country. I felt that we had similar challenges, and that made me feel part of the community. So I 100% now identify as a Latina. I think in this country, this is my first identity, even before identifying as a Brazilian, curiously enough. I don't know if this is I can't really pinpoint when that became my major identity, but there were multiple moments. I think when you face prejudice for being Latina, this is something that is quite tricky. Like the first time when people screamed at me or said, go back home, or said things like, you don't even pay taxes. And that happened to me at like Columbia University.
What? Not at the university, right? That's crazy. What? Okay, yeah, well, how was that?
Yeah, and you know, academia can be a very lonely place for underrepresented groups, and I mean for women in general, for Latinx community, for African Americans, and you know, if you are from an underrepresented group, you have probably faced those days, you know, and the more you study, the worse it gets, because fortunately enough, if you look at undergrads now, we are a major power now. Latinx women, we are the majority actually women. But if you go to the PhD level, then it gets more and more lonelier. So there was a point for me when it was really tricky, and I said, you know, if this is the kind of oppression imposed on me, I might as well just embrace this. And as I think it's similar for many of us, I live in a Latino community. I live in Washington Heights in New York. So everyone around me is from a place in Latin America. Now with the movie and the Heights, people seem to understand what we're talking about. But like my son, who is 5 and speaks Portuguese fluently because we only talk to him in Portuguese, also speaks Spanish because of our neighbors and our community here. So this is something that I think is really telling of who we are. And how we bond. So for me, it is now part of my identity. I know a lot of the complicated history of the term and how obnoxious it can be sometimes, but I learned to embrace it, and I really love embracing it and identifying as such. I started to even appreciate my accent. I think it expresses bravery, actually. I think it comes with a sort of you know, having an accent is revealing of my history. So just opening my mouth, some people can say, oh, you open your mouth and I see you are a second-class citizen. For me, opening my mouth means I'm really amazing because I made it here. I crossed this border, I'm taking chances and I'm risking myself. So for me, it's a good thing, and it's a good place to be.
Right, and every single day, like, thank you so much for sharing, right, and for being vulnerable. I like to honor people's stories when they get here. But Mila, it's so true, right? The first time that I found solidarity where I was, there weren't a lot of Brazilian people. The first person who I remember looking across the room full of white people, right? Full of white, Americans, because we know that there's white Latinos, black and, brown Latinos, right? Was one of my best friends. She's Dominican, right? And that's when I first found solidarity. And fun fact, Mila, to bounce off of what you said, like the tropical girl, this concept was actually born, like the tropical girl is a character that is from the Heights, and I'll share that with you really quickly. So I have a good friend of mine who is based in the Heights, and he is, from the Dominican Republic, and we were at Bennett Park. He looked at me and he said, you're actually very tropical, like pineapples and pine trees. And I'm like, what does that even mean? And at the time, it bothered me, right? The same way that it bothered you that folks, would initially approach you in Spanish, right, at first. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? So as we were thinking the show, right, and looking at different experiences and different identities, I was like, let's go with that, because I too am the tropical girl, and I think that's something that we can really talk about. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I got a lot of love, for the Heights and all of our Latinos from the Heights who are watching us today. Los amo, ya tú sabes, y me enseñaron dembo, and so many different things, right? So my next question to you is, something that I really admire about you, Mila, and the work that you do is you're always highlighting Black and brown folks, within Latinx communities, right? Because one thing that folks tend to not understand is that there's white Latinos, right? And I love the way that, Mila, you are very intentional about highlighting, Black and brown stories, right? So why? Essentially, why do you think that's important, right? You and I know why, but our audience doesn't know why. So why do you think that's important?
You're very correct there when you say I'm very intentional. It is intentional. I am, and unfortunately, due to the algorithm and the world we live in, we talked about underrepresented groups. It takes more time. So it is intentional, and I spend much longer periods of time researching to make sure that I'm acknowledging that. For instance, when I'm preparing a class and I'm working on a syllabus for that class, I intentionally look for women, and especially women of color in general, and brown and Black authors and intellectuals. And it takes me roughly 5 times as much time as it would take for me to do a regular syllabus with, authors in general. So the underrepresentation is real, and it's everywhere. And for me, as a researcher, this is something that has been very challenging. I wrote 2 books about the life of a Black Brazilian musician and composer, Dona Ivone Lara. You sang so in the beginning of the show, and for writing about her was a challenge because sources are gone, so you have to rely on oral sources, on interviews. No one really seems to care about preserving the history of samba in the archives and in institutions where we would expect that to be happening. So on one hand, I was feeling like I had talked to her so many times, so I needed to address that. But on the other hand, as an academic, when I was citing works, I started noticing that most of the works were written by white men.
Wow.
And I felt that can't be it. This can't be the full story, because Black intellectuals have been working since we've been talking about being intellectuals. So there has to be more than that. And I started a research. I went a lot to the Schomburg Center here at the New York Public Library. I spent a long days working there to look for those authors. And it became something that was meaningful for me, because there are stories that have not been written by the canon, and they are there. Right. So I thought that it would be my obligation as an ethical obligation as an intellectual to look for them and just acknowledge them. Curiously enough, I've never faced any kind of prejudice in Brazil. In Brazil, I'm 100% perceived as a white woman. Right. I've never had to deal with any of the challenges that my Black friends had to deal in Brazil. And I admit that before moving to the US, I was not even close to the awareness that I am now. So it's another life for me almost. And now that I face the fact that I'm not perceived as a white person in this country, and yet many people in the community also say you have to also acknowledge the privilege that you, and then we'll talk about colorism, and we could spend like another entire show.
And you do acknowledge it. I feel like you really do.
I do. I appreciate you saying that, because this is, again, very intentional. I'm looking for that, and I'm trying to acknowledge that all the time. So in summary, it was basically the fact that I think that as an honest intellectual and as someone who is interested in knowledge, I thought that I would never be good enough if I were not telling the full story or looking for the authors that have been there before me. So I'm always citing Lélia Gonzalez and Beatriz Nascimento, for instance, who are authors that have deeply, deeply influenced everything I do. And I don't think, like Beatriz Nascimento, just now they released in Brazil a book with some of her works.
Yes.
For me, this is outrageous, to say the least. This is someone who should be like have statues all over the country with her, and people should be studying her work and debating her work in so many different avenues about Blackness, but about gender and so many, and movies and whatever, you name it. She talked about everything. Lélia Gonzalez, very recently, last year, they released a volume on her works in Brazil, and whereas if you, even here in the US, it seems that people know about her more than they know about her in Brazil. So I do think this is, no, I don't feel like it's my responsibility, because I wouldn't dare say that I'm as important as that, having a responsibility with that, but it's just part of an honest, integral and committed intellectual work. There's no way you can do an intellectual work without looking for the authors that have been purposefully omitted from the history that we're telling.
Thank you so much. And it's so crazy to me that you mentioned that, because someone like Beatriz Nascimento, right, whose birthday was not, was just the other day, right?
She's my son's birthday neighbor. And
oh my God! Wow, happy belated to your son. He's so cute. Shout out! Happy birthday, feliz aniversário to your son. And it's so crazy, because most Brazilian, like Black Brazilian intellectuals, they're also community organizers, right? So it's one thing doesn't separate from the other. And I think that it's so crazy for me to say this, and I may get a lot of backlash for saying that, but I think that most, radical, and when I say radical people, it's folks who really do work to get, liberation to communities, right? And when I say liberation, I mean get communities what they need in terms of rights in different areas. So I feel like most Brazilian radical intellectuals / community organizers, because it's hardly ever separated, they get more clout, right? They get more value in the U.S., right? So you look at Paulo Freire, right, who was the patron of Brazilian education. He too gets more clout in here, and it's so crazy to me to see that, right? When I moved here, and then I saw that across, many education schools, folks were, trying to use, Paulo Freire's work and other Brazilian scholars' work. To me, that was a huge surprise, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. Someone like Beatriz Nascimento is more known here, and Lélia Gonzalez and other scholars. So Mila, our last question today, because it's so good. I would be in your presence forever because I have so much to share, and I'm so grateful. So so for folks who Latinas, young Latinas, there's a large population of 15 to 18-year-olds who are watching our show today and are looking for some inspiration and advice. Folks who are in Brazil, folks who are in other countries in Latin America. What is your advice for, that young Latina who's interested in, social media and news and is interested in sharing stories? What is your advice for young folks who are watching today and want to, go down the same career, go up the same career path as you did?
So first of all, I just wanted to make sure I state here that when I'm citing Black and brown intellectuals, I'm not doing anyone any favor. It's about being a good work.
Amen. Yes.
with Brazilian intellectuals, it's pretty much the same thing. So when Americans really like embrace the work of someone like Paulo Freire, it doesn't mean that they're not a bunch of brilliant Brazilian intellectuals back there in Brazil, embracing the work and trying to improve it and make edited volumes and so on and so forth. But there's also a crucial difference, which is money, right? Many of those institutions here have a lot of money. They have existed for much longer. We're seeing now the public university in Brazil, which is where I was born as an intellectual, being completely abandoned and destroyed. So I've seen that happen. And with contemporary historians, for instance, if you are a good scholar here in the US, you know who they are. And you're writing about Brazil or about Latin America, you go after them because they are so good. And we have a kind of theoretical knowledge and approach there that is so really rich. And when I started my PhD here, I think you might have felt the same way. I felt like, I totally know those references, and many of my friends around me didn't. So we also have a very trustworthy and strong and bold group of intellectuals there that deserve being shouted out, not only here but there. And there's an institutional and historical problem that I think has to be acknowledged. So the one thing that I would recommend is that you do your work. And when I say do your work, is like, don't wait for people to teach you about those things, or we have so many tools today, right? You can just Google names and you can read pieces online. And if you have access to internet, go for it. If you don't, you can use a public library. If you are in the US, if you are in Brazil, you have more limited options, but they exist. So just do your work in terms of doing research and all that. And it took me a little time, not as long as I think it takes for some people, but it took me some time to really accept the fact that I would have to work harder and that it was not fair. Because I sort of, there was a point in my life that I sort of glamorized the fact that I had 5 jobs while doing my PhD. And now I'm not really very proud of that. I think it was necessary and it was what I had to do to get there. And I honestly think that unfortunately for many of us, this is going to be the only way. So I encourage you, if you want, to look for support, email people around you who are in your area. Here in the US especially, people think that this is quite normal. So ask for a coffee, ask for help, send a message, say, can you meet? Can you talk via email? Do you have any tips for me? Just look for support, create a network of support if you can, be brave, and don't ever think that there's something wrong with you if people tell you that you don't belong. The problem is with them if they say you don't belong, because this is not what it's supposed to be. This is not how you build a complex and beautiful world, excluding people saying they are not enough or they're not part of that. So just be mindful of the narratives that are presented to you and the narratives that unfortunately still prevail, and creating strategies to navigate those narratives, because they are there. And I'm not saying that you have other ways of navigating. So like oppression is a reality, racism is a reality, and we have to acknowledge it and be strategic to learn how to face this in our generation now, because things don't seem to be moving forward as quickly as we could expect. But at the same time, just know that you have value and you can bring so much to the table. If you do your work, if you do your research, if you're a serious and committed person, you have so much to bring to the table. So don't let anyone laugh at you using a pronoun in the wrong place and making fun of you. And don't feel like you're less than anyone else because you have an accent or you use a pronoun or you are a woman or you look like this or you look like that, because it's really their problem. And they are creating a world that is not as beautiful and complex and rich as the one you can create by offering them yourself and your real self. So I don't know if that's a good tip, but that's how I'm seeing things at this point.
That's amazing, Mila. I really appreciate it. And, as a Black Brazilian, right, I appreciate you so much in the work you do, right? And it's something that, because, when something crazy happens when it comes to racism in the world, like a racism related event, someone like me gets called all the time, right, to talk. And one question that I get a lot is what should I do and how can I support? So my default response, Mila, is usually this very thing of thinking that there is, a Bible or an instruction manual that you're gonna find all your, race-related questions answered. That doesn't exist. That very thought of thinking that there's one place that you're gonna go to get your problems fixed, that doesn't exist, and that's very colonial, right? And we try to shy away from that, and I really appreciate that you share that, you have to do the work, right? And you did the work, and you do the work, and that's why I appreciate it.
It's also very colonial from them to think that you, as a Black Brazilian woman, are the one responsible for giving them the answers. They should not be asking you for that. They could ask for your opinion and for your take and your interpretation on things, but not like, give me a guideline. Right. As I said, there are resources there available, and unfortunately, overwhelmingly more available for certain people who have not been oppressed for centuries. So they can really use their time and access to Wi-Fi and all that to do their work instead of putting all that burden on you, right?
Amen. That's so true. Mila, obrigada. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you. I hope you have an amazing day. And again, I'm looking forward to hearing more from you and the amazing work you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. As I said before, it was an honor being here with you. Continues being an honor. It was a great conversation. You're a great interviewer, a great interviewee. Whenever I see your interviews, you're great too. So
Thank you.
I love the content that you produce. So it was really a joy being here with you. I wish you all the success and love and joy that you deserve.
Thank you, love. Thank you so much. Bye, Mila. Tchauzinho. Thank you. Wow! Woo! Shaken to the core. That's how I feel. Tell me how you feel down below in the comment section. That was another episode of the Tropical Girl Show. She didn't mention it before, but you can find her at Mila Burns on Instagram. Her Instagram itself is a great resource. Again, I hope you stick with me for another episode. We always have more great show for you, so please don't go elsewhere because it's always sunny at the Tropical Girl Show. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm out. Bye.